Connecting the cloud server. Okay, so here we are, we're recording, and welcome everyone to today's guest talk with Dr. Harish Hande. This is happening during our climate justice focused week of the course for the Orcas cohort. And so we've had a series of sessions and discussions around topics connecting intersectional climate justice lens and movement to our exploration of the course content. So this is a really exciting guest talk. We've had Dr. Harish Hande come to speak with our Terra cohorts each time we've launched a cohort. So he's a dear friend of Terra, and Kamal formerly worked with Harish. So I'll be providing an intro, which Kamal wishes she could give herself, but it's 5:30 in the morning for her and she's sleeping. Harish is the founder of SELCO India and founder and CEO of SELCO Foundation. And he is also the recipient of the Magsaysay Award for his work providing clean energy for poverty alleviation across India, which is basically like the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in Asia. So he is a real pioneer in clean energy and development. And Kamal worked for him a long time ago, I forget exactly how long, and shared a really amazing story about Harish in her intro to his talk in our first cohort. Something about walking through a coffee plantation in southern India and being covered with leeches all over their feet and having a moment of near meltdown, but recognizing Harish's calm presence in the face of this sort of pest challenge. She was able to keep walking and discover this micro hydro project that had been installed to provide power to the coffee plantation. So I thought that story was a great example of the kinds of work that Harish does. It's very field oriented and directly in contact with people and communities. And it has just been amazingly inspiring and eye-opening to hear Harish's talks over the past two cohorts. So I'm sure today will be no different. And thank you so much for joining us, Harish. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much for inviting me. And yes, yeah, we're missing Kamal today. So I was thinking whether I speak for 15-20 minutes and then generally giving a perception of what it is right now, and then we can go into a what you call it, a discussion mode rather than me speaking and boring all of you in many ways. So it would be good to have a good debate and a discussion of what we should do in both, as you mentioned, climate justice, because maybe just to give a background, yes, I work for an organization called SELCO, which from 1994-95. It's been 25-26 years of journey that to look at how do you look at sustainable energy as a catalyst for development, and how to democratize delivery of health, education, livelihoods using solar energy as a catalyst per se, and started off 2 or 3 of us way back in an idealistic fashion, saying that how do we look at solar, and the centerpiece was solar at that point of time, and then quickly it gave away to the whole question of what are you trying to serve? I mean, are you serving lighting? Are you serving livelihoods? Or what is the end goal of doing it one way or the solar was just a means. And so it was just to, I mean, it in 95 when solar was perceived to be expensive, but we always said at that point of time, not now, at that point of time, that solar was expensive for the rich and affordable for the poor. And that's because the rich needed subsidies. And if you had looked at the costs that the poor were spending on energy, it was between 10 to 12% of their incomes. And like a typical, in 1996-97, if you look at an average street vendor in Bangalore or anywhere else, were spending between 10 to 15 rupees on kerosene a night for 4 hours. So that basically became 450 rupees a month. That's equivalent to 4.5 to 5,000 rupees for one light, and that too running on kerosene, when most of the middle class and above middle class who had electricity would have paid less than 20 to 30 rupees at that point of time. So we would always say that as we went lower into the economic strata, the percentage of energy expenditure on energy actually increased, and that led to people to be in poverty, because for the poor, it's not the incomes and the lack of income sometimes make them poor. Yes, one of the reasons, but also the cost of resources, cost of energy, cost of services, cost of water, getting those, cost of education is what keeps them in poverty. And today, if I come from a country like India, where we are subsidized by the poor, it is not the poor subsidize us on a day-to-day basis. We live on the subsidies of the poor. We hide behind the poor in terms of our utilization of sustainable energy, because you look at the market values that we pay to average street vendor or a maid servant or a driver. They subsidize us. I mean, if you look at the market value, what they should have been actually paying for. So if you look at, so we started to look at what is just justice. One is economic justice, and on top of it, what COVID has actually taught us today, COVID and climate change, the maximum brunt is actually paid by the poor for no fault of theirs. Whether it is poverty, or whether it's climate, or whether it's COVID, they were not the reason for it, but they are paying the most for it. And that is injustice, which we are actually not solving. I mean, if you look at that injustice, where the world got together, and mostly the middle class and above middle class, and I'm not talking the Americans or the Europeans, I'm talking of the middle class and above middle class across all the countries together. You created this, what we call a so-called vaccine for a disease called COVID. But for energy poverty or financial poverty, which is not in my backyard, I have not been able to create a so-called vaccine, right? That injustice of thinking, right, is what we're saying that the concept of holistic thinking to look at sustainable energy to democratize, can it actually create a level playing field for poor to be part of their future by becoming entrepreneurs, innovators, philosophers, Ramanujans, Einsteins? And that's what we look at, that purity of that democratic process, and using SDG 7 as a catalyst. And that's what we do as an organization. Some of the things that we do is we really don't take resumes, because I mean, I went to IIT purely because 300 million Indians did not write the exam. If they had written the exam, I would not have gone into IIT. So it's like a running race where I'm at 50 meters and say I won the race while the rest are at minus 50. And who gets the money in a country like ours or anywhere else for the world? It's PowerPoint, Excel, and Word. So the non-English speakers have absolutely no chance. It's not a level playing field. It's whether, and SELCO was started to basically to break that casteism of education, or whatever you call it, racism of education or whatever, and of degrees, as well as a language. That how do we look at language as a bar that you're so-called educated, because we confuse between intellectual poverty and financial poverty. And we believe that people who are financially poor are also intellectually poor. And that middle class thinking, or above middle class thinking, that we have replaced the British colonialism by that middle class thinking. And that's what we keep the poor in poverty. And we say, how do we use SDG 7, that is sustainable energy, to provide a platform to break those myths and break. And so we started this unfortunately, we are known for solar. But that's the medium that we look at. But what we also saying that we would create an inclusive mechanism where even if somebody joins the organization to drive the car or the office vehicle, he or she should have a pathway to become the CEO of the organization. Why should it be stopped for him or her if he or she has the aspiration or ability to think, ability to work hard? Why can't he or she have the pathway to CEO position while we break and saying that no, those people have to be drivers? No, the question of, oh, I have this driver for 20 years. You yourself would like to have a promotion and an average 10% to 12% salary hike on a daily basis, on a yearly basis. But the driver will be your driver for 20 years. And that's a different type of slavery thinking. And so we said, boss, this is ridiculous. And how do we actually create a system? So SELCO was created out of that. How do we put those ecosystem in place? So now we have around 650 people with 60 offices. And we broke those myths. And if you, I mean, people who are from India would understand. I mean, the top management of 5 or 6 are actually hardly known in India, but more known in the US and Europe. That's because where we our respect for human level. My top 5 colleagues of mine don't have a degree, don't come from MBA schools, or don't come from anything else. Are brilliant Kannada speakers, but don't speak English, but Kannada the core, and have established the organization. If you look at 650, I think the top 50 or top 60 haven't left the organization for last 18 years. You have an average turnover of people of less than 1%, and basically using, and a lot of the people who have risen up. I mean, for example, Mohan, my colleague, who I'm glad is not in the seminar because I won't say what I'm going to say about him. He joined the organization as an office assistant in one of the rural offices and is now the CEO. And the issue was he's a brilliant Kannada speaker and a brilliant artist. Yakshagana artist, which is part of Karnataka. And Guru Prakash, who joined me as a technician in 99, and he left in a year. He wanted to leave and said, my parents are very poor. We have half acre land. I need to leave to take care of my parents. We said, boss, we're going to open an office in your house. He's now the deputy CEO of the organization. And it's a 100 crore organization that these guys have built. And the unfortunate part is, as Kamal or anybody say, or Salim said, I've got a lot of awards because I speak English. It's on their work. It's on their work, right? And if you look at like a country like India, tell me how many non-English speakers run any corporates? That shows the divide of the thought process, that we do not have a single non-English speaker as a corporate head, except Baba Ramdev or Lijjat Papad head. But where is that? And that's for us. It's not about sustainability. It's about also how do you build in sustainability with inclusivity, and that's what justice is about. And so we started building the organization that way, and we are. And also, we basically fought a lot of small battles in terms of type of investments, destroying the myth of what actually impact investment means. Why should we have a social enterprise? People call us a social enterprise. We said we are an enterprise. The others are anti-social enterprises. Why should I get a category named social enterprises? Boss, I'm trying to rectify what you guys have missed in terms of, you guys means the normal corporates. Why we are putting up the hole? We are actually putting mud into the holes that the others have created. Why should I be created separately? Shouldn't the norm be enterprises like us and saying that, no, it's a social impact investment? Shouldn't investment be impact in the first place? Why should I create another category of environment? Oh, they're social enterprise looking at the environment, and why shouldn't that be the norm? Rather than we are creating a separate structure as if it's special, it's different, and everything else. And so those are things that when you're looking at a health center, when you're designing the health center, why shouldn't we think about sustainability, the building design, the efficiency of the X-ray machine, the baby warmer from day one? Why should it be an afterthought? Let me put a solar panel. Oh, I'm green now. I mean, in the sense that, does it matter if I put solar panels and I use 10 air conditioners? Am I green? But it's not the question of putting solar panels. It's a question of design. It's a consumption. It's the utilization of energy. It's the pattern, and how equitable are you in utilizing this energy with the rest of the society per se. And that's equitable and inclusive thought process that needs to happen. It's not solar panels or batteries. And so we wanted to get away from being a product seller. Are we an ecosystem developer where we actually look at interventions of each and every household or each and every community that we go to and see whether we are actually making an impact? Because for a first and foremost for us is that if our intervention for any reason is not actually increasing the income or a quality of life of a person, and because of which they are either in a technology debt or an economic debt, we have made no intervention. Absolutely. And that's unethical for us. And so all our sales colleagues of ours, we always train them that, Asif, are you speaking to your father? Like if your father comes and asks me, I need 4 lights, what would you say? Father, do you actually need 4 lights, or 2 lights are more than enough for you? It's like, how do you redesign the thinking? It's not, you get away from the pattern of just sales and consumptive sales, which leads to profitability of a one part of society and not looking at intervention of the whole society per se. So we basically go into, I mean, a typical example, I think I mentioned last time also, I mean, which is where a technician colleague of mine, there's an auto rickshaw driver who came and said, I want a 3-light system. And seeing him, he said, this guy can't afford a 3-light system. And said, but I know what your problem is. He went to his house and broke a top of the roof and put 1 light and said, he needs light in 3 rooms. He doesn't need 3 lights. So this design thinking process exists. And unfortunately, we are the people who create those barriers, because none of these thinking, the people who think that way, who exist, are not on LinkedIn, or not or not of that. So we completely, so we've created an exclusive club, you know, in terms of LinkedIn and all that, where we basically think that, and the people who are in the LinkedIn and all that decide the policies for the people who are there without understanding what the solution. Today, what classically happens is we all come up with brilliant solutions and then want to find out the problem that can fit to your solution, rather than questioning what those solutions are, or articulating what the problem is, and then trying to fit the question to answer to that. It's like typically when you're reading an exam, first I want to go to the last page, what the answer, and then somehow fit my answer and make sure that the answer fits to the problem that I'm trying to solve. And that's the fundamental mistake, is because we've not articulated the problems that the poor go. And number one. Number two is unethically, non-inclusively, we come up with the solutions without actually including the poor who are facing the problems as part of the solution, as solution providers themselves. We are again taking the concept that I am going to provide a solution for you. That hierarchical thinking that they cannot come up with a problem is a fundamental issue why a lot of the problems that we are not able to solve today, because we have created that gap. And that needs to be destroyed. And there are brilliant people in the rural areas or any of the slums who need to be stopped being termed as beneficiaries, but need to be called as partners. How do we create partners? I mean, if I had to create a solution for software, I would definitely go to whether Nandan or Narayan Murthy or somebody. But when I have to come up with a solution for a blacksmith blower, I go to an IIT professor, never to a blacksmith blower. Why is that? I mean, we will do a survey of blacksmith blowers of what we want, but we will never include them in our thought process, or they can be a partners in solving it. And that needs to break, that they become partners of actually solving an issue that a blacksmith blower goes, whether we need what type of hammer mill, at what times does he or she need a hammer mill, what is the cash flow of the hammer mill, that so that a particular financial product can be created for them to own the hammer mill. Who creates those systems? And that's exactly why if 40 to 45% of the world is still under poverty, is because there's a hierarchical thinking process and that's when, in a very small way, we wanted to destroy that. And we wanted to destroy the whole thought process that you can create an organization that is, number one, is destroy the myth that poor can't afford technologies, sustainable technology, destroy the myth that poor can't run it, and number, destroy the myth that you can't run a profitable venture while trying to meet social objectives. And that's what we are. We are around 25 years this year, and 650 people. That's been profitable for the last 12 years. And interestingly, and my colleague runs it, I so-called technically ran it for till 2014. And I ran it because I had wonderful colleagues. That had I been, I would have got collapsed. And myself and Thomas, who started it. So Thomas left in 2010. Said, because in 2010 we decided that by 2014 the four of us who were from day one should not be part of it, because it was non-inclusive, unethical, because we were riding on the efforts of my other colleagues who had actually built the organization in many ways. And said 2014 the colleagues who actually, so when they took over in 2014, it started to do much better. And so they run it better. It grows at a faster rate. Even in, I'll tell you what happened was, it's a way it's structured. To just give you an example, it's a for-profit company. It's owned by 3 not-for-profits, and no single person owns even a single share, but 3 not-for-profits. And the way it's designed is that the profits go back to the company, depending on what the shareholders need or want. No shareholder can take the profit out. The mission of the organization belongs to the management. No shareholder can sell his or her shares without the management actually doing a due diligence on a potential shareholder, whether their philosophy matches or not. So, but what we did also, we created another checks and balances where all the profits go into a fixed deposit. And every year we take out 20% of the profits for the employees. But the way it's decided is that, suppose we make X percent profit, 20% is taxed, and out of the 20%, then we say we allocate Y amount per person. So divide that money divided by Y, and suppose the number comes in 100, then the bottom 100 people get the profits. The least earning 100 employees get the profits of the organization. And so if it's little more, then the bottom 150 get it. And so that's been the structure from the last 15, 16 years. That has led to a zero turnover of people at the bottom 40%, zero turnover at the top 40%. So our overall turnover of people is less than 1% and 1.5% over the years. And then 20% more money, 20% is for profits, 20% is kept for emergency funds. In the sense, what has happened is many of our colleagues joined SELCO, got married, had kids. A lot of kids have grown with SELCO. And now there are quite a few coming into college level. So any of the kid can dip into the company's profits for college fund. So any kid of SELCO can actually, and so we keep those 20% for whether it's a death of a father, family member, the funeral cost, or a house gets destroyed in a flood, or a kid wants to go to college. That's a accumulated fund from 20% of the profits every year that's kept aside for the organization. And that's how the company has grown. And even in COVID scenario, when many of the enterprises have collapsed. So Mohan, in March, when the COVID first lockdown happened in India, and we had zero sales in April, and we had 600, he took a very strong stance that no matter how long the COVID exists, we will not let go of a single person. 650 people will not be let go because of COVID, and will not. Immediately there was a relief of 2 months of salary, or 1 month of salary, and medicines, cost of medicines were advanced to all the employees, 600 of them. And in March, he came and borrowed $500,000 from the board. That is his own money from the fixed deposits, because we had zero sales in April. And they cut down their forecast by 40%. And but what they came out with was a brilliant plan of looking at what are the sectors that needs to be looked at. And health was they went into swab collections solar powered swap collections, solar powered hospitals, solar powered checking centers in states, borders, and everything else. And now in December, tomorrow I have a board meeting where they have actually crossed the last year's half yearly targets by 15 days and are profitable. So they're going to cross last year's total target in March by at least 10%. So if you are creating, if a bottom-up organization who has absolutely grounded and the people who run it are from the client base itself, you can create a sustainable organization which is actually truly inclusive. And that's where, and they have not taken any debt. And then they took what, $500,000 they actually, Mohan, returned back in November $1 million back from the profits back onto the deposits. So you can create an organization provided it's how do I call it? I'm talking about bottom up is really it's about people who understand what business is. And unfortunately, just because somebody goes to an MBA or an English speaker need not run a business. And that's a fallacy of what we think of the investment managers or something else. That again, like LinkedIn, we have created an exclusive clubs. And that needs to be broken if we have to create an inclusive society. And that's where we are. And then in 2014, we said we have failed 99% of the time in the organization. We don't want the other youngsters in the country to go through the failures that we have gone through. And so we said, let's create a foundation which looks at how to build ecosystem in other parts of the country. And Google, for example, as I spoke last time, was the biggest subsidy Google has today is the internet. It did not pay for the internet. Who pays for the ecosystem? And today, suddenly when we decide to serve the poor, we suddenly make it financially, economically viable, etc., etc. But who pays for the ecosystem? And that's when the foundation was created in 2014. And we created 2010. We also created a SELCO incubation. How do you inspire other kids, vernacular speaking kids in other parts of the country? And the last one was basically we shouldn't have, but out of complete frustration, we created was the SELCO Fund, because a lot of the people who are graduating from the incubation, many of the people were not investing in them because they didn't have a degree, an MBA, and this whole. So we said, forget it. We're going to create our own fund, and it's a SELCO Fund, which is registered by SEBI to look at entrepreneurs from Meghalaya, Manipur, Assam, and South Odisha. In the eastern part, some of the poorest parts of the country. So in the foundation, we have around 120 people who look at innovations of an ecosystem. And what I mean by an ecosystem innovation is typically give you an example, two examples. If I give you one is, if I put a solar powered sewing machine, everybody says that solar is expensive. Nobody says that the sewing machine is inefficiently designed. If the sewing machine was efficient enough, my solar power could have been economically viable for the poor. And second, instead of doing 2 shirts, now she does 8 shirts, does not mean that she has increased her income. She has increased her production. If there is no linkage to the extra 6 shirts, she will not be able to pay for the system. And is there a financial product that actually matches the cash flow of the sewing shirt that leads to? So it's a combination of technology, affordable finance, market linkage, and the efficiency of the machine. So it's the whole ecosystem. How do you build that ecosystem? In same way, lastly, I'll end it with an example of analogies. I mean, there's so much analogies in this world that you don't need to look for solutions outside, as long as we keep our eyes open, which I told last time also, which is one of the easiest examples to explain, where, for example, how do you reach out to people who really, really are very poor, say earning less than 10 rupees a day or 20 rupees a day. I mean, if you look at rural Kalahandi, where barter system still exists, and 400, 500,000 rupees a month incomes. And what they require is lighting for 4 hours so that the child can get educated, and are willing to pay 1 rupee a day. And then what happens is when they, what they want is 4 hours of lighting. And what we do is basically put up solar panels on schools and light and battery at home, where battery is less than the weight of a lunchbox. So the kid goes to the school, plugs it into the school's charging station, and the mother says, I don't care whether you study or not, go to school because I want light at home. So if she doesn't go to school, there's no light at home. So you basically incentivize multiple social metrics of higher attendance. So it's like A plus B plus C. A is a school, B is a A is the coal-fired plant, B is the transmission line, and C is your house. A is the school, B is the kid, and C is the house. A plus B could be an entrepreneur delivering lights. Where do we cheat this from? We cheated this from the Indian midday meal, in the sense that kids come to school because the government of India provides free meal. And so we reverse the model, in a sense that how do I look at what service that the school can give in the opposite direction? And it's the same thing, A plus B plus C. So there are so much models that can actually be created looking at these analogies. And that's what we do, is look for analogies. If American Express comes up with a new credit card, can I actually borrow that product, customize it, and rethink what can actually be done? Or a street vendor's financial model can actually be looked for a blacksmith blower or a silk weaver in Manipur. Or how does maize we do a cropping pattern using drip irrigation in Ethiopia? Can it be looked for rice or millets here in central India? If the water models of Colombia, can I use that to look at energy models in India? So such examples already exist. And only thing is that we need to forget ourselves that we are mechanical engineers, we are electrical engineers, we are journalists, English. We need to be, end of the day, we are a solution provider. We all should be just solution provider. Can you imagine tomorrow a street vendor who sells tomatoes? And tomorrow, if tomato prices go very high, she says, I'm sorry, I'm a tomato seller expert. I will not sell anything. If she says that, her 3 kids will starve to death. How come the poor will have to recap, but we become very streamlined? No, boss, I have a PhD in X, and that's it. So more you study, the more useless you become for society in many ways. And I think, how do we broaden our horizons to look at, we should be looking at solutions, and rather than becoming a master of one, and so you become less useful in the world in many ways. So that's a story. Thanks so much. Hopefully.
Wow, thanks so much, Harish. There was so many good things to take away from that. And yeah, I'm just gonna have to watch the recording to keep my memory fresh on all of this. So I think there's already been one question shared in the chat, but everyone else who has a question, feel free to ask it or type it in the chat, and I'll call on you to ask it. But Radhika, if you can unmute yourself, if you want to ask your question, you can kick us off.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, hi Harish. A brilliant conversation with you. I think at least in India, SELCO is anyways quite famous in terms of hello.
Yes, Radhika, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so I think in India, at least we all are quite aware of how SELCO operates and what SELCO does. And it's brilliant to see something like that happening here. My question to you is, so this is from a very personal space that I'm asking this, but I've been kind of trying to put my house cleaning stuff, the maid that I have, onto some PF or some kind of, salary style engagement with my contract with me. However, I see it's a big problem in this country that the core service providers do not have any kind of formal structure of earning, and which is where a lot of their problems lies in probably taking credit or kind of having a safety net in terms of medical insurance and all of that. Absolutely. And they end up depending on probably policies like Atmanirbhar or some kind of Medicaid from the government. So I was wondering where the gap first of all lies in terms of policies, why we're not able to kind of make it a better formalized structure for these guys, and more importantly for probably the sewage cleaners that we have. They fall under the jurisdiction of say an MCD or a DDA or whatever, Delhi authorities. However, they still do not have that structure in place, and they're the ones who suffer from all the pollution we create at the end of the day in terms of plastic burn, like whatever is there at the end of the day in the piles. So where first is the policy gap, and second, we as individuals and say private sector companies, how can we probably bridge that gap and say take a step so that we can meet halfway with public policies in this area?
Yeah, there's an extremely tough question, but I'll first answer the second one. Okay, if you could, we had 3 years ago or 3 years ago, we did a failure conference in Bangalore. And failure conference, I mean, as you know, all right, I mean, if you look at NGO reports or reports, no NGO in India has ever failed. All reports are brilliant. I mean, and if you add the outputs of all the NGOs, it's 3 times India's population that we would have served by now, right? And so, and then we are also, it's like, I mean, you know, I mean, a girl comes back home in India and say, I've got 96 out of 100. The first question we ask is, where did you lose your 4 marks, right? So we are so worried about, oh, my cousin got 97, your cousin, why did you get 96? How come you're not? So the question is, we are so fascinated by that. So we had a failure conference, and where we invited 45 people, saying that you got to talk about your failures, not about what is your biggest weakness, I work too hard. Not that type of answers. We want saying that, boss, personal failures. So we had people from, I don't know, Vijay Mahajan, who basically said how he screwed up 680 crores, to Gauri Singh, who was a government additional chief secretary, and said, I have spoiled so much of money for the government without realizing that if I didn't know the agenda of every person coming to my meeting. One such was Bezwara Wilson, who gave a brilliant speech on the and saying of failures of the sewage workers and how do we look at, and if you can go to the website impactfailures.org, it's what our website is there, and you can listen to Bezwara. He'll actually tell you the actual policy level for the sewage workers, and that's actually one of the best captured solutions. Okay. In the first case, there are organizations that are, and especially I see most success that we can actually copy from the farmers, formalization of the FPOs and the JLGs, the joint liability groups, the FPOs, the farmer producing organizations, and the SHGs, the self-help movement. All these are getting more and more formalized in the rural areas, where the RRBs, the regional rural banks, and the cooperatives are having a better formal structure of making them part of the formal society, where they do have they have a bank account, and the best part is, how do you make them asset owners? Because a lot of us here have a social security of owning an asset, and that's exactly why we have multiple social nets under us. So today, a lot of us, is very difficult for us to get into poverty until the whole social net, actually 7 layers of social nets has to collapse for us to get into poverty. Right. And so for the people, one is formalization, one is insurance, one is access to essential services at the most affordable. Then the formalization of that, and the most critical part, Radhika, is our thinking process that the maid servant's kid will always be our kid's maid servant. We have to remove that also. It's not about the maid servant. Can her kid compete with my kid? That should be the thought process. And how do you break that? And so the formalization of I would say the JLG, SHG, FPO model is what needs to come back into the urban areas, because the urban areas are the most non-inclusive, because we do want to complain that how my second maid servant didn't come, right? The question is, we need to get away from that hierarchy and start making, and now there are slowly, not as much as we think, where I would say, Radhika, if a lot of people like you start thinking, there's going to be a paradigm. It's not the policy that is going to happen. You know, many years ago, there was a policy when it was written about sexual harassment, you know, there was a meeting that happened. Let us not put maid servants into the document, because there were people, idiots, who were there saying that it is easier for maid servant to accuse, and let's not put them so easily into that document, and didn't come in the first draft. So it's the middle class and above middle class has to start changing, because a lot of our own type of people are in the policy making. It's no different. Government is who we appointed. The IAS officers are one of us. I think both the society, and as we start teaching the kids about what is the value of the person who comes and works with me in my house, that education system is true. But on the positive, there are so many such formal schemes that are coming up in the rural areas, that how does urban India start learning from rural India, I would say.
Makes sense.
Thanks for that question and your thoughtful response, Harish. So let's see, Jabir, I see your question and then Sarita. Would you like to go ahead, Jabir?
Thank you, Harish. It was really inspiring talk. I'm also a social entrepreneur for the last, so-called social entrepreneur for the last 6 years. I run a sustainable waste management company based in Kerala. So stuff, which during my thought process, I realized that there are two things, maybe there has to be a need for a solution. And the second thing, there has to be a willingness to pay for that. So when I started off the enterprise, I realized that waste management is a big issue, but nobody is willing to pay for, because so I miserably failed in the first 2 years and burned a lot of money. So my questions now, I was thinking of setting up a solar, a firm, but I realized that because I have a usually the rich or the better off people have a 5,000 rupees of electricity bill, and for them it's afford to pay. But for the low income family, it's actually 200 rupees, 300 rupees. So it's all the concept of, whenever we design a solution, there is a concept coming mind, because the rich are afford to pay because solution works there. So if you design something for the poor or low income families, the whole self-sustainability, the for-profit models may not works. So there was always a dilemma why I designed solutions, for in that case, the willingness to pay, or whether they're afford to pay, or because a person, I went to a person's house, he advised me, I found it very interesting. He said, how much money you actually spend in your pocket for energy, electricity, health, or education. So that means if somebody is putting out 100 rupees from his pocket to education, that means there is money in the market. So you go to that specific place, people are spending more. So there was a lot of so I just wanted to hear from you that part.
No, see, the question is, Jabir, it's the, why do you buy a TV? You never buy a TV on an Excel sheet based analysis. And it's one of the most expensive product if you will ever buy in your life. 3 hours on a daily basis is equivalent to 1 year of your life watching TV every 10 years. And if I calculate that 1 year value of your time, that's the most expensive time wasting that you have done, right? But still you would buy it without looking at economics. The many of the people that who look at lighting, and especially the poor, it's all the value add. In a sense, are you providing value? First is, for example, most of our clients, if you look at today, we have around 800,000 clients. And out of that, at least there are 600,000 who earn between 5 to 7,000 rupees per month out below. And that's the client base that we serve. And many for them, it's about either you show, and who are the opinion makers. In the earlier days, for us, it was the postman, the rural doctor, the local priest, the father of a church or a temple. Who are the opinion makers that you start talking to? What is it? And then you put up systems in 2 or 3 houses or 2 or 3 places of general commonality. People start realizing, and then start looking at, okay, then I would go to a banker and say, are you willing to finance? If you're not, what does it require? A simple example, Siddhis. I don't know how many of you've heard of Siddhis, and some of Siddhis are these African slaves who were brought in by the Portuguese from Tanzania and Mozambique, and they were left in central parts of Karnataka, Goa, Gujarat. And when the Portuguese left, many of them were left behind. An average Siddhi family earns 1,500 rupees a month. Out of the 1,500 rupees, they spend around 140 rupees on kerosene and candles. And they spend 10 rupees a charge for charging a mobile in a village. So around 40 rupees a month on mobile charging. So around 200 rupees a month on energy, kerosene, candles, and mobile charging, which is around 2,500 rupees a year, which is around 12,500 rupees over a period of 5 years. The question was, a solar, if financed over a period of 5 years, cost 10,000 rupees. The barrier was not technology. The barrier was not affordability. The barrier was the financial product. So when we first to the bank said, boss, they live on a 10 feet by 10 house. Nobody's going to pay for it. So what we did was, what do you need for these 30 families? Is that 100% guarantee. So we put 100% guarantee against the 32 families. After 6 months or 7 months, we went back and asked, they said payment is fantastic. We asked a simple question. If you knew this information 6 months ago, what guarantee would you have taken from us? He said 20%. We removed our 80% money out. So using 20%, we had leverage. Now, the same banker using our 20% money has now financed 155 households. Effectively, my guarantee is 1%. But the best answer was from the Siddhi. She said, solar is great, but once my loan is done, I will take a loan for a sewing machine. What she meant is I have become bankable. The beauty of our ecosystem thinking is that it puts people multiple ladders in the social, multiple rungs in the social ladder. And now 155 to 200 Siddhi families who earn 1500 rupees actually have a 10,000 rupee solar product. Is a question of what is the value? What is the financial product? What is the, like in the same way for a roti rolling machine, it's 70,000. You know, one lady said, I want to buy a 70,000 rupee sewing machine. Provided you give me a loan. So we took a loan and gave her. And the sewing machine, so roti rolling does 1,000, what do you call it as, rotis per day. She would have been earning around 2,000 rupees a month, man. Took a 70, what she did, brilliant, was she went to the two printing organizations who print wedding cards, and told both of them that whenever you have a new wedding card printed, please give me an address. She would go to that house which has a wedding and say, I'm going to supply rotis for your wedding. And if that clicks, she gave a 10% commission to the wedding card printer. She now sells, she bought 2 more machines of 70,000, makes 2,500 to 3,000 rotis on a daily basis. So there is a spirit of thinking of opening up solutions. So that is what we tap on. We are basically a middleman of sorts, and that's all we tap into looking at. And that's as long as we say, what is the solution? So if somebody is not buying, that means the product is wrong. And the product is wrong, whether it's a financial product that is wrong, it's a technical product which is wrong, or is it the ecosystem which is not yet ready? So think like an anthropologist or a solver, that you're taking a plane 35,000 foot and suddenly you come down 0.5 foot and see where the problem actually lies. And that is the excitement of, and you can create, it's basically solving different puzzles at different point of time. There are cases. Waste management is a game of patience and long-term equity investment, because it's a game of assets, and it's a game of what you call it as recycling, and where the money is actually made in the other part of the system and not on the supply side of it. And so if you can think of those, don't leave in just because it's somewhere. Be patient until somebody throws you into a well. It will happen. This is a game of patience.
Thanks for that response. And I'm sorry, Hemavathi, I'm going to go to your question because I saw that it was up in the chat. So we'll go to you and then Sarita.
Yeah, thanks, Lainey. Thank you, sir, for that wonderful talk. I think I'll take a week to just process all the information we have just spoken, 30 minutes. I just want to pick up on your point where you spoke about language in the context of just communicating. And I've just recently started working on a couple of things in terms of climate change communications. And in India, I mean, at least in terms of, I'm from Karnataka, so I've been trying to figure out ways about how we can talk to waste workers, regarding climate change and stuff. So if I try to translate, say, words climate change to Kannada and the words weather change to Kannada, both, come up with, we don't have words to differentiate weather and climate. So it becomes very difficult for us to just, explain these concepts, or just the concept of sustainability, right? This is a word that has been framed by people in the West, and we don't have words for that in our regional languages. So this sort of creates a very big barrier in terms of what we want to communicate to all these people and help them understand these things, because it is very important why we want to get them involved in the decision-making process. If language becomes a barrier, I mean, it becomes very difficult to empower them and enable them to become a part of this decision-making process. So how do you think we can overcome the challenges, or just your thoughts on that?
See, I would not, for example, I would say, why are you doing it? Right. Number one, is it, I would go directly to the effect part for them. If it is if it is the type, the waste speakers, for example, I would go to the effect. I mean, for example, if you look at Karnataka and if you look at North Karnataka, okay, and if you look at the Dharwad, Sirsi, Kumta, that belt, lot of the farmers understand climate change without knowing the word climate change. Right? Because there's an articulation of the problem, what has happened because of climate change. Have they lost livelihoods? Has the rainfall become erratic? Have the droughts increased? Has the, what you call it, cropping patterns have to be changed because of cash flow? Start from the problem side where that's a problem I have. Because it's a same thing. Like, for example, if you talk to a person in say Midwest America or central part of China, why I'm not getting affected by climate change? I am not affected. Go to Manhattan, right? Why some of the stockbrokers are interested? Because they make money on the insurance. Now, because some of the other people are taking insurance. Let's talk. See, for many of the people, it's like, it's the same issue as clean cooking or sorry, helmets, right? Why do we wear helmets? Not because we're going to get killed, because the police will catch us, right? We wear a seat belt because the police will catch us, not because we're going to get killed, right? So what is that negative feel that I have to lead? Start from there. Like a kid in Amsterdam will laugh at you because you don't have an helmet. How did that thought process change from it's so cool without a helmet to very cool not having an helmet, right? So, or having an helmet. So how do you, that starts from, I would first ask, where are they getting affected? And how a little change will actually lead to positive of their life or income. So start from the problem side rather than saying a climate change. It's a very alienated, if I'm not being affected, farmers will understand. Did you in North Karnataka and Gulbarga, from 20 days of rainfall in the last 10 years, suddenly they have 10 days of rainfall. So I would pick up the fact that your rainfall has decreased. Yes, I understand the rainfall. What should I do? Right? Blah, etc., etc. Suddenly you're doing this because it's going to go 5. Yes, I understand it's going to go down by 5 days because it has gone from 20 to 10. And that is because of climate change. So the question is, you have to relate to something that affects them, us. How many of our kids or in the Bangalore actually understand climate change? It's a very nice topic in an exam, but it's not something that a lot of our families feel about it. I mean, if all of in Bangalore, you live in Bangalore, if all of them felt climate change, none of the software companies should be designed using glass buildings. So let's start from the top. Why should the software industry in Electronic City, as well as those of all buildings, they say brilliantly designed so-called buildings, oh, well, I'm environmentally friendly because I have environmentally friendly air conditioners. So let's start from them first, because they understand climate change, but they're not doing anything about it. So let's start with the people who can do something, and then it will follow.
I'm curious to hear more about impacts of climate change on agriculture in India and what farmers are doing. But I'm going to just hold that and get to some of the other questions from our fellows. And then if there's time, or if I can send you a follow-up, Harish, I'd love to learn more about that space. So Sarita, I'm going to call on you to ask your question.
Hello, sir. Partly you have answered my question about the building. This was the case in Bastar where the school building was to be constructed. And then there is a standard design which government or any other organization gives to the community. And they said that you have to design the school in this manner only. The area is given, the material is given, everything has been standardized. And then there is a cap to the fund. And the local said we can design and lessen it, but then it was not approved. So how do we break this thinking or the ceiling that it has to be standardized, design, cost, everything has been worked out for them. and there's no say from the community itself.
Sure. I mean, I completely agree. So what this is, Sarita, when the foundation started, and built environment is a very critical component of our design piece. So we have a whole bunch of my colleagues who work on built environment. So what we do is, for example, we are working in, say, the state of Meghalaya. The first thing what we map out is Meghalaya has, say, 8 to 9 districts, and every district has a DC, the deputy commissioner. We pick up who is the best champion DC boss. Let's catch hold of him. And same way in Karnataka, when we've gone in Karnataka, who are the champion panchayat or DCs? Again, DCs. Okay, it's like when you go to a university, you always want to have the best professor, right? Who is the best professor, what you want, or best teacher or anything else, right? The champions works everywhere. So the best DC will say, can you look at this design? What he or she will tell you, Harish, there's a standard procedure. What I can do is first put up 2 or 3. Then I will replicate. So what we did for a PHC of changing the design of a public health center, for example, public health center, the most energy inefficient is the maternal labor room. Okay, and the most dismal in terms of its design, where as such after delivery she's the painful delivery, and you have such a dismal condition in, not you forget the health condition, but also the depression, right? I mean, you're going through this pain. How do you make it airy? How do you make it whitewashed in a better way? How do you look at simple things like better design of lighting and the fan and the ventilation and everything else, right? So we put up 3 or 4 centers. On that basis, the DC said, boss, he became, after 2 years, he became the health secretary of Meghalaya. Now he is saying, I want to do 100 of them. By March 31st, I will do 200. If I do 300, I blanket Meghalaya. What we did was we captured one DC. And that's why I tell my younger colleagues, catch hold of the DCs. The DCs are 28, 29-year-old people who manage enormous populations. One person would be enough to tell the other DC, because this DC can call up the other DC and say, change the design. So the good part of all the people who are attending this webinar do have access to such people. Unfortunately, poor do not, because we create another hierarchy. But boss, let me go and do these 3 designs for you. I will show it. And can you replicate? See, what the government has is money for scale. What the government does not have is money for innovation. And that is where the philanthropic money needs to be involved. And so PHC design, Anganwadi design, right? Community center designs, common livelihood center designs, completely change. Even low cost housing, right? What we talk about. So I don't understand the word low cost. So in the sense, I have a 200 square foot, right? We are saying that moment I tell you 200 square foot, you think a poor man's house. A 200 square foot in central Tokyo is an extremely rich man's house. Can't we copy that design of 200 square foot and put it into the slum areas of it, right? Get hold of one DC guy or an MLA and MP. See, unfortunately, we put all people in one bucket. All politicians are bad. All catch hold of one politician guy who is good, who will try. They will eat from your hands after you prove it to them. This is valuable. And so, after so many years, I'm not, people say, well, there are ministers who say, boss, Harish, don't come during daytime. I have Lal Batti, I'll come to your office. That's not because, it's because we've been able to provide those champions. But there are half the IS officers are very good. The only problem they say, Harish, that everybody complains to us. Nobody comes up with a solution. It is wrong, that is wrong. But I am here for 2 years, but nobody comes with a solution to me. I will change that to happen. So there are 20, 30, 40% good, brilliant characters. That's our politicians or MLAs, MPs, MLCs, everybody. I mean, it is not like everybody who graduated from a certain school became brilliant. It's the same ratio everywhere.
Yeah, thanks for that response.
I think MP Madhya Pradesh is doing this solar retrofitting in Anganwadis.
Okay.
Fantastic.
So, MP has a different issue. MP has a wrong person at the top of the education. So And so we are waiting for that person to get transferred. So moment that is there. So we wait for that patience game. Like we have 20 leads and 10 good guys, and we in certain area we wait for till the person gets transferred because we know we are going to talk to a wall.
Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Thank you. Thank you for that exchange. And we're just about at time for this talk. And so I'm wondering, Harish, if you do have like 5 to 10 extra minutes, I can kind of bunch the last questions and see what we get to. Otherwise, I could send them over email and just relay them.
Yeah, somebody asked me about crafts.
Yeah.
I want to address that. This is some of my colleagues came and said we need to save the crafts. I said the save is a very dangerous word because everything has to have some sort of a value for the future. Why didn't we save the typewriter, for example? And I said, oh, these tribals have brilliant art. I said, boss, if you're going to adopt those true tribal kids, would you send them to an education that you had? Or are you going to keep teaching them crafts because they come from the tribal sector? Why is it that I want to save crafts provided only they do it? I will not do it. I'm going to be in a sexy NGO which will promote those and then go over to my career, but they have to save it, not me. My son will go to New York for PhD, right? The question is, are we making sure that a kid, wherever he or she is not disfranchised because you created a false structure of so-called saving it, and your kid then moved forward in life? And I think that's where, I mean, even languages, right? There are a lot of Kannada people Kannada national who come and say, you got to save Kannada. I said, boss, you don't need to save any language. All languages save because there is an economic, in South Karnataka, there are people from Karnataka, there's Konkani and Tulu, which is not written, but how are they surviving? Because if you don't know Konkani and Tulu, you cannot do business in South Karnataka. Same way, the day Infosys and Wipro start taking resumes in Kannada will survive. That's not, why is everybody going to English? Because it's an economic language. It's not because English is great. Same thing, when people want to save, the save is a very, very tough. It's like, well, why are we not still to typewriters? I have moved on to, everybody would move on to so-called iPad, but crafts, is there a long-term system? Brilliant. There are brilliant people, right? In terms of who are doing crafts. When we go there, we create these artificial systems sometimes, which unfortunately you leave and the next generation in that particular place goes back into poverty because you did not show the options that kid would have had equivalent to the options that your kid has. And this is where we need to relook at how do we popularize crafts and make sure, because today the way the craft is looked at is in an extremely colonistic view of we will save it for them, and unless and until together can we make it go forward, otherwise it's a way the crafts has been looked at in our countries. Like I feel bad when I go to Orissa, false financial interventions are done, and I know these NGOs will collapse, leading to the collapse of that particular tribal society. And happily we wrote report and raised more money, and we moved on to other villages, leaving this society. And the way we work, both civil society and private sector, are extremely unethical in the way we look at development. Without looking at, we say we want to make them partners, we don't truly make them partners as long as our reports are written and photographs taken.
Thank you. Great. Well, thanks so much. So let's see. There's 2 more questions that I see from Regal and Pooja. So maybe if you guys just both want to speak those out loud, we'll see what kind of response we can get in a couple of minutes, and then we'll just conclude and wrap up and be able to follow up with Harish over email and things like that. So let's see, Regal, just share your question, and Pooja, share yours, and then we'll have some concluding thoughts from Harish.
Yeah, so my question is that we have a visible gap between poor and affluent class in India. And Harish, where do you see the climate landscape in that way, in those terms heading in India? Because there are innovations, which are existing. I was reading about a solar panel, developed by IIT Guwahati students, which is called Jugnu. So are these innovations, which are happening, are they even reaching the poor class in India? So where are we going? I just wanted to understand that.
Sure.
Okay, let's have Pooja weigh in, and then we'll leave it for Harish to respond.
Hi, Harish.
Hi, Pooja.
I'll read my question. How do we involve how do sustainability become a part of the strategy and foundation planning that is done by the MSME sector of India? How do we make it even a financially viable conversation to even have right now? And in the end, how can it be scaled? Because MSME sector is like the largest contributor to the GDP.
So yeah, so the first, Regal, the question is, the answer is going to be very similar to whether we look at Africa, whether you look at the Navajo Indians in central parts of the United States to Africa it's not a climate change question. The question, the beauty of it's a development. The beauty of sustainable energy is a catalyst for which democratizes in a social, financial, and environmental manner the delivery of health, education, and livelihoods, where development is the prime game and it's more economical than any other source of energy or interface. And the added benefit is climate. So when it comes to the poor, we should get away from the whole climate dialogue and go to the development dialogue. That's why when people say, boss, I'm not anti-coal. I'm not anti-coal, but tell me, why are you pushing a future more expensive technology on the poor? Because coal is a future expensive technology, both in terms of environment, both in terms of transmission. Solar is much better today, or wind. So why are we unethical and pushing it? So today, what has happened in the green field, in the climate, we are always defensive. We always want to prove ourselves defensively. Well, we are often, you are the expensive technology, we are the affordable technology. So you prove it to me now, why should you be taken versus me? And that's all we are doing. And we're playing the development game and saying that any part of coal fired or any part of any other fossil fuels today on a financing basis, because of the cost of solar being so low, it's highly economically viable, both for the livelihoods as well as for the SME sector. The issue today is, Pooja, the MSME sector, the problem is the inefficiency of the equipments that is actually, see, inefficiency is the best friend of the grid. And people actually rely on inefficiency to promote more grid, in a sense. And once you bring in efficiency and you bring in efficient financial products, sustainable energy actually wins, is a clear win on any Excel sheet program, because our financial products are not designed that way. And nobody's really hard working on efficiency of whether you talk of a lathe machine, whether you talk about a silk weaving machine, a blacksmith blower, or anything. Once you start working on the efficiency, sewing machine. So solar, I mean, it's a question of putting those pieces of puzzle. And then the first part was about how do you look at disparities. The question is, unless we are very serious, because COVID and climate change, the biggest brunt is going to be faced by the poor. And that's what we need to all look at, that social unsustainability is going to be more expensive than financial sustainability. And that has to be taught, that how do you, it's not about creating an Excel sheet and saying, how do I put a price to social unsustainability? And that's exactly what happened when the Black Lives Matter, or if you look at the floods or anywhere else, it's a question of equitable distribution. It will spring up, it's going to rise, and climate change is actually going to increase those social disturbances. So it's for all of us. And if there are 30 people across here, and if each of us came up with 5 solutions, we'll have 150 solutions. And mind you, for the state of Karnataka, we only need 450 solutions.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing those thoughts. And Harish, if you're willing to answer any questions from the fellows via email, I think Shefali had a question. Okay, I'll put it in there. And yeah, I'll wrap up for today, but this has been incredibly enlightening, as many of you have pointed out. And thank you so much for sharing your views that will help a lot of us guide our way through the course and our next steps and the solutions that our fellows are talking about. So I really appreciate it, Harish, and it's just been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for inviting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'll share the recording when it becomes available on YouTube, and I'll share it with you as well, Harish, for future records. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.